Why is it so easy to want to get into Airbnb, but so hard to know exactly where to start and what to do first? After going from Division I baseball to building a 7-figure portfolio across 50 markets and helping hundreds of other people launch their first property, I realized something. Getting good at Airbnb comes down to 4 things you do before you even look at a property. So if you want to get into Airbnb arbitrage and finally know exactly where to start, listen closely. Number 1 is regulations. The first thing you need to do before you look at a single property is find out if you're even allowed to operate in the city you're targeting. Most people never check this. It's the fastest way to lose everything before you even get started. I can't tell you how many horror stories I hear of people getting fined, getting shut down because they skipped the regulation research at the beginning stage of launching the business. This is the most important thing. And before you even start looking at properties, you have to go through the regulations research first to give you that go ahead. This way you're not wasting time. You want to make sure we're going after Airbnb friendly cities. Not every city is going to be the same, right? All markets have different regulations, different rules, and different restrictions. So we need to iron out when we do our market research, is this place an Airbnb friendly city? Now, the one thing that you want to take in high consideration here is going to markets that have some sort of regulation already. There's a fine line between this. This doesn't mean going to Los Angeles, California, where you have to abide by 30-day stay minimums. No, that's a super heavy regulation. So we want to stay away from those cities. But when I say somewhat regulated, we want to go in these markets that have maybe a small short-term rental license that we got to apply for, or some sort of permit per property, right? Stuff like that, where it's not overly regulated, but already has something in place. Those are the cities that we want to go into. Now, on the other side of this, you find cities that have no regulation at all. These are good cities, but to be frank, I still rather go into cities that have some sort of regulation already implemented, because if you go somewhere where there's nothing at all, chances of the city flipping a switch and throwing in some crazy regulation is way higher compared to going into a city that has some sort of regulation to begin with. Now, let alone regulations, the next thing that you want to dive into is zoning. Okay, zoning is different in all markets as well. We have to break down the city, and there's different zoning restrictions in different areas and parts of the city. And sometimes this varies based on markets. Okay. So when we pick the market, we find out that the regulation is pretty lenient, right? There's something already in place that we're good to abide from day one. Then we got to look at zoning. Okay. Because there may be some areas of the market still where you cannot operate short-term rentals. So you want to dive into the zoning restrictions, and this stuff's pretty easy to pull. You can find a lot of this stuff through the SOS, right? Secretary of State, or just doing some deep dive in Google, also using AI to pull short-term regulations. Now, these do fluctuate quite often. So personally, I rather just call the SOS directly and you can speak to them, ask them about the short-term rental regulations and also the zoning. They'll be able to walk you through exactly what you need to know. What you want is a market that already has some regulation in place. Nothing extreme, just lenient. A city that requires a permit means they are not going to flip a switch and ban everything overnight. If you want us to help you find the right market and build this out for you, the link to book a call with our team is in the description below. The second thing is market research. Once you know the city is safe to operate in, the next mistake people make is picking a property based on how it looks or what they can afford. Most people think that is market research, and it is not. The first thing you want to do is start finding high demand markets with low saturation. What does that mean? We want to go ahead and start putting all these markets in perspective and seeing the total supply and demand. Supply meaning how many active Airbnbs are actually in the vicinity, and what's the demand for the Airbnbs here. That's the most indicator of telling us, is it saturated? Is it not saturated? Do we want to move into a market what is really competitive and has 20,000 active Airbnbs, or do we want to go into a market that maybe has 4,000 active Airbnbs with high demand, right? So this is a really important part of the market research, and it's first find these high demand markets that have low saturation. And again, the way that you do that is you have to look at the total supply and then pull the demand. Now, this is called finding a gap in the market. Okay, let's dive deeper into this. So when I'm doing market research, what I'm actually doing is, again, I'm looking at the total supply. How many active Airbnbs are there? But then I'm also separating that by how many sized properties are actually in this market, meaning how many 1 bedrooms are here, how many 2 bedrooms are here, how many 3 bedrooms here, and I'm looking at how many total supply at each individual size property in this exact market. Then what I'm doing from there is I'm pulling the demand, which means I need to find out of the 1 to 3 bedroom size range of properties that I'm looking at, what is the gap in this market? Meaning how many 1 bedrooms are here? Is there a high demand for that? How many 2 bedrooms are here? Is there high demand for that? And then how many 3 bedrooms here? And is there high demand from that? Now, where the gap in the market comes into play is, let me give you an example. Let's say there's a lot of 1 bedrooms here. Demand there is high for them. There's not that many 2 bedrooms, but the demand is high. But there's a lot of 3 bedrooms there with the demand being high as well. Well, I'm going to go after 2 bedrooms because there's less supply for them, but the demand is also there. It's called a gap in the market. And the way that we do that is when we're doing the market research is find the total supply categorized by the size of the properties. And then you could go ahead and start going deeper on the actual demand per size property. Now, the next thing we want to do is want to make sure the margins are there before even committing or signing a lease. Okay, so when you're in the market research phase, you want to make sure that you are going to profit around $800 to $1,000 per bedroom door. So for example, if we have a 2-bedroom sized property, since that counts as 2-bedroom doors, I'm taking the principle of 800 to 1,000 per bedroom door. I'm multiplying that by 2. So from a 2-bedroom property, we're going to be expecting to net profit $1,600 to $2,000 a month after all overhead. That's after rent, expenses, utilities, supplies, you name it. That is net profit. And simply, if the numbers do not hit that, just move on. When I first got started in this, one of the biggest mistakes was really just trying to overskip the market research or trying to speed through it because I was so eager to get my first deal and get it up on Airbnb. And to be frank, I had a horror story myself. So my first ever property actually landed out in Pennsylvania, which was about 2.5 hours away from my house at the time. And I signed the lease way too soon. I actually signed it virtually without even seeing the property, without even sending anyone out there to check it. And over time, when I did go to the property after I'd signed the lease, like put eyes on it and start planning my decor, I ended up finding a lot of problems with the property. It was not turnkey or rent ready. Now, I went in the basement, there was leaks. I went into the bedrooms and the floors were not level. There were so many things wrong with the property and I almost got scammed. Thankfully, I ended up getting out of the lease. I got all my money back before I ordered any of the furniture. And long story short, 2 to 4 weeks later, I can't remember exactly, I actually landed a 5-unit deal. I was actually closer to the university that I wanted to be close to. The zoning checked out and it ended up being more of a profitable deal because I did the market research phase correctly, let alone everything virtually, but I made sure the property that I was going into was rent ready. I made sure it checked out with zoning and all of the things that we talked about prior. I rushed that previously, and that's what most people tend to do. And that's why I really want to go slow through this market research phase, because once you get it solidified and you really know how to do it and you really know how to look for good deals, it becomes easier time and time over again. So for me, I was one of those people that rushed it, right? And I had those pitfalls, and thankfully I was able to get around them. And 2 to 4 weeks later, I landed a massive deal, but that was because I learned from my mistakes and I was able to do the market research correct on the second time around. Do not try to make a deal work if the numbers do not make sense. The right property in the right market will show you that from the start. Number 3 is systems and automations. This is what most people get wrong completely. They get their first property live and they think the hard part is over. Now, the way that you set up the first property is really going to determine whether you can ever grow past it. So I like to use this opportunity to run about trial cleans with 3, 4, sometimes even 5 different cleaners from the area. And I just line those up at different parts of the day as we're going through the furnishing part, because then I get to see them, right? Get to know them a little bit, get to ask them my own questions. And that's how we vet and train really good cleaners, right? We're not here to train them how to clean, but we are here to get to know them a little bit. We do want some things that they want to add into their procedure to get them short-term rental ready. And it's a really good opportunity when you're setting up the property just to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Now, over the course of the next few months, like as you are growing and scaling, once you have 2, 3 really solid cleaners that you can trust, that's the foundation of the business. And that's what's going to allow you to scale. In the beginning stage, it's so important to run those trial cleans, meet as many different cleaners as you can and hire the best one, because you really want to paint this vision on where you plan to take the business, how many properties you plan to scale to over the next 3, 6, 9, 12 months to get them to buy into your company, because you want them to grow with you. Next, what we want to do is actually set up the software stack. So the first one is going to be a cleaner software. Okay, that's Turno. We've talked about it in previous videos. That is going to allow you to automate 100% of your cleaner scheduling. The next one is going to be a property management software. We use Hospitable. Again, we've talked about that in previous videos. Hospitable, in my opinion, is the best PMS software out there. That's going to allow you to automate pretty much 70 to 80% of guest communication. And then thirdly is going to be a pricing dynamic software. That is going to be Price Labs, very common in the Airbnb space, right? We help all of our clients actually set that software up, set pricing up correctly. You got to know how to use it, even though it is going to fluctuate your pricing daily without you touching it, which is phenomenal. You still have to know how to use that. And then the fourth one is going to be Remote Lock. Remote Lock is going to be a lock software where you can essentially hook up the lock on your front door of your property to Airbnb and also your property management software. This way, right when guests book with you, they get a temporary check-in code. And these are the software stacks that you want to have. And immediately we want to get these in fruition and actually up and running as we're furnishing and as we're launching the property. This way, everything is in sync together. Now, these tools are going to allow you to offload all the non-revenue generating tasks, right? Sending welcome messages, scheduling cleaners, adjusting pricing every second of the day. We do not want to put our time, focus, and energy into those things. In the beginning, a little bit is okay, but from a bigger picture, we need to only be focusing on the revenue generating tasks of the business, which is making more relationships, landing more deals, focusing solely on pricing from a 1,000-foot overview. Those are the revenue generating tasks of the business where you want to put your time, focus, and energy. So we want to implement these softwares to get these miscellaneous tasks off our plate from the start. Now, this is so similar to when you look at builders, right? Or developers that build homes. What do they start with? They start with the soil and the foundation and they work up. It's the same thing here in business. So as we're securing the first deal, we have to incorporate those systems, teams, and automations alongside of bringing that first property into the portfolio, because that's what's going to allow us to scale, right? Get to $5,000, $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 plus a month. Without those systems and without that foundation, it's nearly impossible to get there, right? You don't see builders building a second floor or third floor without having the ground level done and stairs to get up there. They build the foundation, they work on the bottom stuff and work up. That's exactly what we need to do here with this business. Now, this really helped me out a lot because once I really had this solid core foundation of 3-4 cleaners that I really trust, I really just started giving them more opportunities to make more money in the business. So around my 4th or 5th property, I started just using them and allowing them to launch the properties for me, unboxing the furniture, staging it, getting it ready for the professional photographer to come in, and then hooking up all the locks to the softwares. It was pretty easy, but since they'd been in my properties over and over again for such a long time, they knew how I wanted to furnish them, how I wanted to stage it, right? So I just gave them more opportunities of, hey, I'm going to ship all the furniture here. You guys go ahead, get it ramped up. And of course I had standard SOPs for all this stuff and had them send me before and after videos, daily updates, right? But point being is when you build this really good foundation, it just gets easier to scale. So the more properties you add in the future, you can start having them launch the properties for you and furnishing and so on and so forth. And just to top it off with this, that's what took me from working inside the business to on the business in a very short period of time in the beginning stage of scaling. Build the foundation with the first property, and every property after that gets easier. That is the whole point of doing it right from the first time. The 4th piece is scaling. Most people think scaling just means adding more properties, but more units means more problems if you did not build the foundation first. Now, as you do begin to scale, we need to continue making sure systems are in place, let alone the systems actually running and the automations actually firing with welcome messages and all these things. As we do scale, there is going to be more things happening inside the business, which means as we grow the portfolio, so does our team, so does our systems, and so do our automations. So the best thing to do this is as you do scale, I'd say close to 7, 8, closer to 10 properties, you want to start looking at bringing virtual assistants on, because you are going to get more messages that the AI or automated messages cannot take care of, like miscellaneous questions from guests, like what good restaurants to eat at, or them asking questions where they can find specific things in the property. Once you are hosting 5, 10, 15 people at once, those questions will start to stack up. So as we do scale, we do want to start bringing in people to start even outsourcing more of these tasks. And the best way to do that is bringing in virtual assistants. It does get easier as you scale, but only because you're bringing in more people in and taking more off your plate. The systems and the team have to grow alongside you growing the properties. Once you have the right people in place, your job changes completely. You stop managing the day-to-day. You're only focusing on the 2 things that actually grow the business, which is pricing and creating new relationships and landlords to land even more and more deals. Talk about negotiating. As you run the business for 1 to 3 years and build relationships with the same landlords, you start to have real leverage, right? You can take multiple deals from the same partners, negotiate better terms, getting security deposit back, free rent on the front end, longer leases. You start to stand on more of a leg to negotiate when you're working with these long-term partners year over year. A really good example is, let's say you're working with a landlord and you're going on year 2 working with him, but you've taken 3 properties in the time span. Well, you could go ahead and turn around and say, hey, Mr. Landlord, I've been taking really good care of your property. I got a professional cleaning team coming in every single month. I would really like to get my security deposit back because I'm just continuously locking more money away, which is prohibiting me to scale as fast as I'd like. It may not work on the first go around, and that's just a very brief example, but the longer you're doing business with these relationships, you're able to start negotiating these leases. And think about it, when you're scaling, if you don't have to put down security deposit, that's essentially money that you can continue to use to recycle back in the business, and the owners aren't locking your security deposit in escrow that you're not going to get back until you break the lease or not re-sign. So as you grow and scale, when you start adding these negotiating tactics in, it's going to allow you to scale much faster, which means we're going to make more profit sooner. For example, let's say the next year you launch 10 properties, and if you get 50% off the security deposit off those 10 properties, that's close to 10, maybe even $15,000 that you've saved without having to put into those security deposits. That's another 10, 15 grand you could just put right back into the business. You could launch a property or 2 with that money, just negotiating on security deposits. It's so massive and so many people tend to overlook it. And that's really how you scale quick. Now, this is some real game for you guys. This is what really took me to the next level. When I started hiring virtual assistants, I actually started hiring people that have worked for Airbnb in the past. Okay, so my specific virtual assistant, before I brought her on, she was working with Airbnb for 4.5 years, right? And I mean like in Airbnb, like on the back end, working with the guests and the hosts. When I was going through the interviewing and hiring process, I was specifically looking for virtual assistants that have worked in high up positions for Airbnb because they know how short-term rentals work. They know the back end part of Airbnb, and they know exactly what needs to be done on let alone the host side, but also the guest side of things. So when you bring someone like that into your business as you're growing and scaling an Airbnb portfolio, well, they're going to be able to give you tips. They're going to be able to help help you scale. They're going to be able to help you become a better host, or maybe even get you out of situations that guests are falsely accusing you for, because your person on your team knows exactly how to operate short-term rentals. So it's really, really big here is I like to find virtual assistants that have at least worked as a level 2 case manager for Airbnb before. And it's just so massive. So for me, again, I'm always going to relate this back to my team, because I would not have the portfolio I have today without them. And it took me time to build this team. But when you look at this from a 1,000-foot overview, it's very hard to get to a 30-unit portfolio working only a few hours a week if you do not have good operators inside the business working for you. It's extremely important. And that is a really good tip for you guys. So anytime you guys hire virtual assistants, find someone that's worked for Airbnb before. It is massive. They're going to help you just exponentially scale the business. Once the right people are in your place, your role in the business gets smaller as the business gets bigger. But here's what nobody tells you about getting to that point. There are things that will quietly come up inside the business that catch most people off guard and cost them real money before they even realize what went wrong. I broke all of it down in my 10 honest truths about Airbnb after making 7 figures. Watch this video here.